Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Newly Widowed program. My name is Jenny Sellers, and I'm Soaring Spirits Global Operations Manager, and we are so thrilled to be welcoming John Robinette to our Newly Widowed program series of calls. John is an organizational development and leadership coach with the Center for Leadership and Organizational Change at the University of Maryland. After the death of his wife, Amy Polk, Robinette shifted his focus towards helping people be more successful and find more joy in their careers. He began journaling on his blog, holeinthesun.com, about his journey and has recently contributed to the Elephant Journal as well. His memoir, Never Stop Dancing, journals his first year after Amy died. Now remarried, John lives in Tacoma Park, Maryland. John, thank you so much for being with us today. We are so excited to have you and to talk about this important topic of self-care that all of our folks who are walking through their first year of widowhood, it is such an important topic to chat about. And we're so excited for what you're going to share with us. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Susan, as well for reaching out and inviting me. And welcome everyone else who's here today, wherever you are. Tacoma Park, Maryland, is on the top northeast edge of Washington D.C. That's where we are. We're literally a stone's throw, which is both exciting and scary sometimes that we're that close. But that's a separate conversation. Yeah, self-care is something I feel pretty strongly about. And it's something that strangely, when my wife died, and I have some slides I'll go through here in a second. My wife died almost 11 years ago. April 29th will be 11 years. And I had been married and divorced young in my 20s before I met my wife, Amy. And strangely, I think the experience of divorce helped. I knew that there were things like therapy that would be helpful for me and other things like that. And we'll get into that a little bit. I also had two young kids at the time. They were 7 and 4. And I didn't really have time to really think about things too much. I had to kind of get into action for their sake. So I had to get some things in place pretty quickly. I sometimes wonder what it would have been like if I hadn't had kids. And I think it would have been harder in some regard to think about self-care as what would have been my motivation. I think that would have been harder. And I don't want to make comparisons for those of you that have children or don't. I just know from my own experience that it actually took some time for me to actually think about myself in a way that I could feel good about taking care of myself. So let me go ahead and just get some slides fired up here. And let me also, so the book, Never Stop Dancing, we have a web page, our website for it. I'm just dropping it here in the chat. And I added a resource, a self-care resource link on that. So there is a page there. So if you want to, feel free to take notes, of course, but the things I talk about and the references are also in that. There's a PDF you can download and the links are all in there. So don't feel like you got to write down every book or every resource. It'll be in there. And I am interested when we get to the Q&A and the discussion, what other people might be doing, because I do think this is an interesting topic. So let me go here, get the slides, slideshow mode, and then share screen. All right, so you guys can see that? Somebody? Jenny? Okay, thanks, Susan. All right, self-care. So this is our family. This is my wife, Amy, there in the middle, and my 2 boys at the time. Adam is to the left of screen, and Brian, Adam was 7 at the time. There was Brian, he was 4. And my wife died suddenly. It was a pedestrian accident on her way to work. And so that was my experience, and I'll just leave it at that. And I do want to kind of start with what do I think maybe the rules are. And this might be a little surprising, but I'm just going to go through this real quick. So the first rule is, if we're talking about grief, no one gets to tell you the right way to grieve. They don't get to tell you that it's time to move on or that it's too soon to go on a date. Okay, so I'm going to say that's rule number one. All right. Rule number two, there are no stages. There are loops and twirls and valleys and mountains. And when it's time to figure out a way to incorporate grief, oops, sorry about that. When it's time to figure out a way to incorporate grief into our lives, we will, when it's time. We all actually deserve to be happy. We deserve to have joy in our lives, and it's okay to laugh if that's what you want to do. I remember the first time I laughed, I was with my brothers camping. It was about 6 months after Amy died, and it was the most wonderful experience. And I hadn't realized I hadn't laughed for about 6 months until that day. It was, and it felt good. And I wanted to enjoy it. I didn't want to feel guilty about it. And I was with people who let me laugh. And then the fourth rule, maybe the most important, is you can ignore any rule you want and make your own. Okay, I want to make that really clear. Okay, even those three that I just said, you can ignore those if you want. Those are actually my rules. Those are the ones I came up with. Feel free to borrow them if you want or change them. That's up to you. Feel free to do that. Those rules are all actually in the resource guide, including this one, the one that you can ignore. It says you can ignore everything. So what do we mean when we talk about self-care? What does that mean? And I think context matters, what we're going through right now. I think oftentimes in our culture, when we hear somebody talk about self-care, it may be going to the salon or getting their hair cut, maybe going to the gym, maybe it's buying something nice for themselves. I guess that's true. And I think that can still count. But I think what we're talking about now, especially after we've lost somebody, a spouse, partner, we're really getting to some fundamental aspects of survival. What does it mean to be in that situation and have to basically reboot myself and get my body, my mind, and my spirit back into a place where it can function again? And then maybe over time, I can think about the future again. But right now, I need to just get on with stuff. And so when I think about self-care, especially in the first year, or even in the first month or days even, there's an element of survival, I think, that's really important, and we need to hold on to that because that's where we are. It's a matter of survival. So I wrote a article. It was in Elephant Journal. If you're not familiar with Elephant Journal, it's an interesting collection of people sharing their thoughts and articles and things like that. And this was after 10 years, actually, since Amy died. I put this together, almost 10 years. 9 ways to put on your oxygen mask when you're struggling through grief. And I'm going to use this as sort of the starting point, or the foundation of this conversation. And this was my experience of what was helpful for me. Again, your mileage may vary. And so I think many of us are familiar with the imagery, the oxygen mask. If you're on an airplane, the flight attendant will give you the instructions. If there's a sudden loss of cabin pressure, an oxygen mask will fall from the ceiling from above. And if you're traveling with a young child or someone who needs assistance, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first before helping the other. And the reason is, if there is a sudden loss of cabin pressure, and some of you may know this, you don't have much time. There's like 20, maybe 30 seconds, and you're going to lose consciousness. So if you're struggling to get the oxygen mask on a little kid or an elderly person or somebody who needs help, you may not have time to get the mask on them and then yourself as well, because they're not going to be able to help you. A little kid's not going to be able to help you. So that's the point of it. You got to help yourself first to get through this. I think there's another piece to it too, which is in our culture, in our society these days, some of us may belong to a faith-based tradition or church or something like that, where there is some sense of support for what happens when somebody dies. I think a lot of it has to do with maybe the logistics of it. How do you have a funeral, things like that. But once you get past that, a lot of those supports start to sort of drift away. And if we're not necessarily a member of a faith-based organization, many of us aren't these days, there may be an outpouring of support right away from neighbors, from colleagues. But after a week or two or three, at least my experience was, that started to drift off a bit. And it's really in the sort of the longer haul, months 2, 3, 4, 5, how do I get on with it? Self-care becomes really super important. So I'm just going to run through the nine things. First one, sleep. Super important, super hard. Right? Getting a good night's sleep can be maybe the most important thing, and sometimes the most difficult thing. Some of these are interrelated. To get good sleep, maybe getting some exercise helps, or eating well. So these things there's some codependency across these, and we'll see that. But I know for me, over time, sleep became sort of the starting point. If I can get 6, 7 hours, 8, if I'm lucky, everything else works better. So priority on sleep. We know this. This isn't really, I'm not going to give you anything that's radically new, but I just want to call it out. And also, like, it's hard to do, especially right now. But sleep's number one. There's some different tricks on, like, maybe and maybe you need to see a doctor and get a sleep aid to actually get through the night, or try melatonin. So some of those things might help. So if you need to rely on pharmacological supplements, then do it, I'd say, to make sure you can get a good night's sleep. Just make sure you're using it and not abusing it, right? Eat. Some people eat a lot when someone dies. Some people don't eat. I lost like 20 pounds in about 3 weeks. I couldn't eat, and I had a friend like John, you need to eat. But yeah, eating healthy, eating regularly, eating good food, right? Again, this isn't anything radically new, but just to spell it out and make this a goal. I need to have one good meal this week. This week I'm going to have a good meal, and then maybe next week maybe I have 2. Right. So part of this is also to set realistic goals for ourselves, and also not beat ourselves up if we, ate a shitty dinner. We ate nothing but Oreo cookies and a tub of ice cream, right? Like, okay, that happened. Tomorrow I'm going to have oatmeal for breakfast. I don't know, right? So part of it is just letting go of those decisions we made. It's like, that's what happened. Movement. So exercise became super important for me. I started running. I never really liked to run as a thing, unless it was part of like basketball or a sport. But I started to run a lot until I blew out both my knees some years after that. And it doesn't have to be hardcore, Gold's Gym or whatever. I mean, yoga class, Tai Chi, a walk in the woods, stretching. You can hop on YouTube and dial up yoga at home or something like that. There's a lot out there. You can do this at home for free, but something to get the body moving. For me, exercise also helped me connect with my grief physically, which I think was important. And the expending of energy became a way for me to get through some of the anger that was in there as well. So that's the third one, movement. Moderation, and what I'm talking about here is specifically alcohol and drugs. I think we need to talk about that. I drank a lot that first year, and it's something I still have to be mindful of. It's easy for me to drink a little too much. I'm not necessarily proud of it. It's just sort of a reality. My dad's an alcoholic. Um, my wife died at a time before the legalization of marijuana was really catching on. So I think if that were to happen to me now, I'm not sure would I be using marijuana. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying, we have to just be careful if we're going to make that choice to use it to get through. Alcohol helped me get through that first year. I won't lie to you, it did. But then it started to become a problem after that. So I had to really be careful with my use of alcohol. So I just ask you to be careful and to be mindful and be aware of the choices you're making or we're making with respect to what we're putting into our bodies. If cannabis helps you sleep at night, that might be a good thing, right now. I know that helps some people. So I'd say go for it. Maybe find a doctor that can, prescribe it even if you're in such a state. Or it's legal in many states now. But just be careful. I think that's what I would say. Acupuncture. So I had used acupuncture as a way to treat some chronic ailments, sports injuries and things like that, nagging back stuff. And it seemed to help me. I honestly don't understand how acupuncture works. I mean, I understand that there are meridians and chi and there's blockages and the needles help release those blockages. I honestly am not sure I believe that. But I do know that it has helped me. It has helped me with physical ailment. And after my wife died, I don't know what made me think to look up acupuncture, but I looked at the acupuncturist I used to go to, and on her website it said grief work. So sure enough, I made an appointment right away. And there's something about the experience if you've never had acupuncture. It actually puts me in sort of a meditative, mindful state, which I think is part of it. And I feel a connection to my body. And I've had some fairly significant breakthroughs with my acupuncturist in terms of my grief and understanding some of my emotions. I had acupuncture today. I still go every 2 weeks. My insurance covers most of the cost of the session. There's a $30 copay. So if you have insurance, maybe check with your insurance to see if acupuncture is covered. And so if you're a skeptic, does acupuncture work? Well, I'll just say this. If an insurance company pays for part of it, then they must think it works. So I'll go with that. And acupuncture is great. Massage. I've always enjoyed massage, therapeutic massage, sports massage. And after my wife died, just needing physical touch became like high demand for me. I craved it, like just having somebody hug me, touch my skin. And I'm getting a hug from my massage therapist. That's not the kind of massage I'm talking about. But yeah, therapeutic massage really helped relax me, took my mind off things. There's a little escapism there. And this was a bit of a luxury for me. This was like John time. Now, insurance doesn't cover massage. There's a cost to it. It's not cheap. But for me, for a while, I was going every couple weeks. And I would sort of trade off. There was I called it my mall massage. There was sort of the Chinese, Asian massage reflexology place that would, it's just like a chair massage or a table massage. You could get like a 10-minute massage. I'd go there and then go to the hair cuttery to get my hair cut, right? Like that was my spa day, right? Was to do that. And then on the opposite weeks, I'd go to a legit massage therapist that cost a little bit more. But so that was a routine I'd built in for myself. Probably about 2 or 3 months in, actually, I'd go see my therapist on Fridays. I had built in some flexibility in my work schedule. I'd go to my therapist Friday morning, first thing, and then on my way home, I'd stop at the mall just every other Friday, get my 15-minute chair massage and hair cuttery haircut. Keeping this nice and tight. You got to go every couple of weeks or so. So I offer you that massage. Therapy, of course, having been through that divorce, as I mentioned, I'd been in therapy in my 20s, which was a pretty radical thing for, no one in my family ever did therapy. My dad, like therapists, that was like Bob Newhart show, right? Like the psychiatrist. But when my wife and I, at the time in my 20s, we were going through difficult times, she actually started with a therapist, and then she sort of hornswoggled me into it, and I benefited from it. We did divorce, but so I had a sense that therapy was useful. And so when Amy died, I think like the next day, a mother of one of my son's friends is a child psychiatrist, and I asked her for a referral. And like within a week, I was seeing a psychologist who I saw for about 3 years, and then recently 3 years ago. So after a break, started going back to her in the summer of 18. Those two young boys are now teenagers, and so raising teenagers is its own thing, and I needed help getting through that. Anyway, so I've been seeing her again for another 3 years. So therapy, meditation, and this can be a tricky one because meditation's hard. It's hard. I'd done some meditation before Amy died, and I picked it back up, but not right away. And I would maybe be careful if you're new to meditation. I can imagine that it might be difficult, even more so, especially early on in the grief journey. But over time, I did find meditation to be super helpful in grounding me, in helping me focus, and just settling the chatter in my brain. There's a number of apps, and there's a couple listed on the resource. The Insight Timer, it's a freebie app, I think on both iPhone and Android. It's really good. I maybe start there, but there's others. Excuse me. So meditation. And then ritual. And what I've just been talking through, and the therapy, massage, haircut was a ritual. We had other rituals in our house, and I'd actually talked about ritual at the Camp Widow, whatever that was, three years ago now, I guess, in Tampa. What I see as the benefit of ritual, especially for those of us that may not be connected to a faith-based community that has ritual built into it, but to find ways to mark the passage of time, to honor the memories we have with that person, and also to help us let go of some things that we might need to let go of over time. So, and I want to talk a little bit more about ritual. And I think there's an upcoming one of these sessions where the person will go into a little bit more detail or their own spin on it, I'm sure. But rituals, I'll give you some examples. So journaling, journaling regularly, and it can be like 1 minute a day. So even in my day job, so during the intro at the University of Maryland, if I'm coaching somebody, leadership coaching or team development, I'll suggest journaling as a strategy to sort of get a handle on thoughts and emotions that might feel unmoored or disconnected. And it's a process over time. And a minute a day, 5 minutes a day, just pick the same time, whether it's when you wake up or at lunchtime or something, and just what's on your top of mind, and just build that as a habit. Things have come up for me. I've had some revelations through that. Tear Soup is a specific book, and it's on my list of books I'll have here in a second. But the basic setup for us with two little kids is we had a stock pot. I put it by the fireplace, and we had a little bowl that had paper cutout tears. And a woman friend of mine helped me set this up. It was actually her idea. She introduced me to the book. And if we were feeling sad and we didn't know how to express what was going on, especially if I'm 7 or 4, we could write a note on that tear, pick one out of the jar, and then drop it into the stock pot. And so the imagery, I think you get, like, I'm taking this tear, putting it in, and together we're going to collect up these tears and symbolically make a soup out of it as a family. It was important. And my kids picked up on that, and they started to write notes to their mom. And I've kept them, and some I haven't even looked at. I'll just keep them. I guess I'll give them to them at some point. I'm not sure. Special meals. So we honor Amy, my boy's mom, on her birthday, during Mother's Day. And the meal can be special itself, but Amy loved, for whatever reason, Pepperidge Farm Orange Milano cookies. That was her favorite cookie. She was a cookie fiend in general. She loved chocolate chip cookies too. But anyway, for these special meals, at a minimum, we'll have either chocolate chip cookies or orange Milanos, which are harder to find these days, I've found. It's kind of disappointing. Article of clothing. So purple was Amy's favorite color. I bought a purple shirt and tie for her memorial service. And I break it out on special days where I want to honor her or remember her. On her birthday, she went to the University of Michigan, and we were able to start a scholarship in her name. So I always wear that shirt when we go out. There's a bruncheon at the College of Engineering where her scholarship is. So things like that. Spreading ashes. So she was cremated. And for a while, I haven't done this recently, but each place I would go somewhere, especially if it was special to her, I would leave some of the ashes. So she loved to travel. And so it's just sort of a way to spread her about. And sometimes this is helpful too, burning notes or thoughts as sort of a cleansing, burning not to destroy, but to cleanse. If I have a particularly strong thought or emotion, I might burn it. And I've picked up this idea and taken it a little further with my kids, and not so much about the grief of their mother, but every spring at the end of school, the last day of school, we have a little fire pit, and we'll drag in the front yard, and they'll burn their notes from the year of the school. And it's now become a little neighborhood thing. Older son's moved on now, but younger son, and it's really fascinating to watch these young teenagers go through their notebook and put it into the fire and talk about their classes and the teacher they liked or the teacher they didn't like. I had one kid said, I have never felt this good in my life. Believe it or not, during one of these ritualized burning of the notes. It's become a little neighborhood thing. It's kind of fun to watch them process. I think that's part of it, is giving us a way to process what's going on for us. Anyway, ritual is sort of its own little bucket, but I do include it in self-care because I think it is an important part of us marking time and being able to look back and see that we are actually progressing. whatever progressing means. Let me move on here to some other resources, and these are all on that worksheet. I want to wrap up here soon. I'm trying to pay attention to the time. Just across the top, so Tear Soup I mentioned. If you're familiar with Joan Didion, The Year of Magical Thinking it's a remarkable accounting of the year her husband died. I picked it up, I have it on my Kindle. I started reading it just when I thought of it, 2 days ago. I got through 6 pages and I was weeping all over again. That's a tough read, especially depending on where you are in your own process. Some of these might bring up stuff from your own experience. So there's sort of a handle with care warning, I think, with some of these. This third one, Swallowed by a Snake, specifically talks about men and grief. And I think it sort of describes how men approach grief differently. I wouldn't say it's only for men to read. I think anyone could read it. But for the men in the audience, this would be an interesting book to pick up and look at. Rumi, if you're familiar with Rumi, his poetry is remarkable, especially for the age it was written in. He was a Sufi mystic. And he has a certain way of capturing the language of love and the feeling of loss that's really moving. It's hard to not cry when I read some of Rumi. The Other Side of Sadness is a little bit more of an academic book, not too much, but I stumbled across this one not quite a year after Amy died, and it really helped explain some of what I was feeling and going through, because it didn't line up with the stages of grief and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, am I doing this right? I wasn't sure. And The Other Side of Sadness really helped sort of demystify, I think, process what I was experiencing and made me feel okay about it. So it was helpful in that regard. A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis might be an acquired taste a little bit. He's a Christian apologist to some extent. But still, I was at a bookstore in DC, and this book, like on the bookshelf, it was sticking out from all the others. And, it was just like one of those, is this a message? I think I'm just going to read this book. So I bought it and read it. It's not that long, but it's an interesting account of his grief experience. It's a little dry, a little academic, I think, or analytical maybe, but still interesting to get his take on things. Denial of Death is pretty heavy. I actually wouldn't necessarily recommend it, and I've only actually finished half of it. It's that dense. This is really like a graduate academic text, but it blew my mind wide open. And I stumbled across this. This was more like a year and a half after Amy died. It really helped me understand some things about how we as human beings think about death, how we process death, things like that. The Best of the Rejection collection. This is the rejected New Yorker cartoons because they're too raunchy or stupid or whatever. This was another one of those I had to laugh. A friend of mine gave this to me about 6-8 months after Amy died, and I laughed so hard reading some of these, and it really felt good. I just needed that escape from just the day-to-day drudgery of getting on with life. These last two, Everyday Emerson and the Dalai Lama, aren't necessarily grief related, but they were helpful in terms of sort of reincorporating my soul to nature, the Emerson one, and sort of putting myself in connection with humanity again. And I wasn't familiar, I'd heard of Ralph Waldo Emerson, but I wasn't really familiar with his writing. And this is basically sort of an updated summary. It's not Emerson himself, it's a sort of interpretation of it by the author. And then the Dalai Lama, reading this is like, oh yeah, joy and happiness is really, we are entitled to joy and happiness in life. And the Dalai Lama makes that clear in this. And this is a short book. You could get through it in an afternoon. So if that one I read recently, actually. So that one maybe hang on to for later when you're ready for it. But I think it's a worthy book. And then other media, just in terms of support, in terms of self-care, in addition to, Soaring Spirits and the programming here, there's meetups. The Elephant Journal is an interesting, eclectic collection of authors contributing their thoughts and feelings. And if you find yourself writing yourself, you can actually use that as a platform to get your story out there too. Reddit, there's a bunch of communities, subreddits around grief and widowhood. Facebook also. The nice thing about Reddit and Facebook, it's a nice thing, but you can get in an interactive conversation, through the commenting and whatnot. Sometimes that's helpful. And then YouTube, there's just a lot of resources on YouTube. I think pretty much anything that can be videoed has been videoed. And if you search for widow support or grief, there's TED Talks and on all sorts of stuff. You could probably put widow self-help, self-care, and see what you find. So those are some other thoughts if you hadn't thought of that. And that was what I wanted to share. Let me stop sharing, or did I? I think I did. Okay.
Yep, you're all good, John.
All right. Well, it's 6:50. I think. I guess I started about 6:15. So
yeah, this is perfect. Perfect. Well, as we go to end the recording, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. We're so grateful for all of those wonderful ideas, some of which we've talked about in the group already, but others I've never even heard of. Especially that book list was really, really helpful. So we're so grateful for your take and your view. And with that, we're going to close down the recording and go into our discussion. So thank you.
Thank you.